So we have 36 bunks on display, so that's already over the health code for this room. So 3 times as many packed in here. This is international in a way, so you have people in this room that can't even talk to each other because they don't speak the same languages. There's no ladders to these bunks, so you had to climb up another person's bunk to get to yours if you were assigned to the 2 upper bunks. If you can't communicate with each other, you can't communicate with the person above you, below you, or sleeping next to you sometimes. Kids were in here. So young boys would have been in here too. And if they were old enough to be separated from their dad, they would have their own bunk, which could have been scary or not scary for them. And trust was another big thing you had to rely on, because if you were assigned to the top bunk, you didn't necessarily have the space to sleep with your suitcase. So you left a lot of your belongings on the floor, hoping that these 2 guys aren't crooks and go through your stuff in the middle of the night. Also common courtesy. So if we did assign an older person to an upper bunk, hopefully within the population and in the room, they decided that the older person could sleep on a lower bunk and switch out with them. So a lot of things were going on in here. It was probably pretty stuffy with that many people in this room. You had radiant heat on the walls here, and there were large exhaust holes in the ceiling.
Does it get very cold here? Yeah.
It can get cold. Sometimes it's colder in here than it is outside. This whole building is constructed out of redwood, which is very insulating. So sometimes it can be, or it can be hotter in here than outside, depending on what's going on. I think that people come from all over the world. They all smell different. So if this guy stinks and you're here, you have to deal with that. And you really don't have a choice. You know, if you were able to get food brought to you that's specific to your culture or your home, I know if my relatives were in here, we would be eating a lot of little dried fish and things like that. So that's another smell and things you have to deal with in here. So if you're up in the upper part, you came downstairs and went down to those restrooms. The original restrooms were I want to say they were kind of put together last because the design was so poor, and the drainage was poorly designed. They actually, the drain set higher than the level of the floor, so you had a lot of standing water in a wood structure. And they pumped in seawater from the cove. So you flushed the toilet in seawater, you bathed in it, and you brushed your teeth in it. So all the gray water went right back into the cove where we pumped it in from. So it was a really bad cycle of water going on. I think that's also the design was attributed to the fact that this whole place was completed just after the 2006 earthquake. So they had a deadline to finish it by, but all of the supplies and crew had been working to help stabilize the city and then were redirected back here. So they realized after enough outcry from the immigrants themselves, the groups that were supporting them and everything, lawyers and that they needed to remedy that. So they built this addition on the back, used fresh water for plumbing, and they added wash stations on each side. So if you had clothing you needed to wash, you had a place for that. But ironically, for male immigrants specifically, you weren't allowed to be outside very often. So you had to figure out a way, once you washed your clothing, where to put it. And you didn't want to hang it above your beds because all of that dripping would soak your mattresses. So they started on the other side of the building. I don't know if you noticed the lighting in that room. It was basically a 4-spoked chandelier.
Yeah.
They would hang their wet clothing on the chandeliers. Well, if you guys know history of Ellis Island at all, the original Ellis Island was also a wood facility. The original Ellis Island burned to the ground. So here we are 30, 40 years later, building another immigration station made out of wood on an island. And we thought hanging wet clothing on an electrical appliance would lead to fire. So they changed the lighting in this side of the building. So this half of the building is mostly Asian and Chinese.